Thank you, everyone, for joining. You are in the right spot if you've got the need for speed. I am here with none other than Justin Reed himself from Cisive Driver IQ. Justin, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, it's my pleasure to be with you here today, Scott. Thank you.
So, Justin and I have been knowing each other for over a decade, and we've seen some integrations in our lives. We've also seen some freight markets in our lives, and it seems like we're in the early innings of a pendulum starting to swing. So, Justin, let's bring some OG, some old man wisdom here to the people about what we're seeing and how we can help with the need for speed. Because if they don't have it now, it seems like they're going to need that need for speed here shortly.
Scott, I think there's always a need for speed. The sense of urgency is a really important thing, whether you're recruiting drivers or, making sure you pay your taxes. There's a sense of urgency thing that we all have to get right. And this is a great time to talk about this.
I just can't get the urgency to pay my taxes on time, Justin, but I can get urgent about hiring drivers and doing it quickly because regardless of the market, we're in an on-demand world and culture where we want things now. And the slower you are, the more likely you are to lose people. And so we're going to start here for a little question that I'm going to launch in the poll. And in this poll, we're just asking, what is slowing you down right now when it comes to hiring people? Is it manual data entry? Is it chasing status updates from third parties? Is it waiting on candidate paperwork documents, or is it screening and verification? And so, any information, anyone that wants to hit that, let us know what's going on in your world, and we'll come back to reference this in a hot second as we go through the presentation. So, Justin, what we're seeing out there, the TLDR, as the kids say, is driver supply is down and freight rates are up, and those two things are correlated. From things we see with our friends over at ATA, Bob Costello, their economist, this is really a supply side driven rate increases, and what he's saying is it's about 300,000 drivers are down. I've seen 230, I've seen 400,000. No one really knows what the impacts of those enforcements, the English language proficiency, CDL training school closures, the non-domiciled CDL rule. But that's kind of, so we're gonna, what's a couple 100,000 drivers amongst friends, Justin? It's about 300. And you can see that in the rates on the right-hand side of the screen. And so things we know is that in Q2, the spot market went up 19%. And we know that contract freight went up 13%. So regardless of how much was supply or demand, rates are going up. And when rates go up, demand for drivers go up. FreightWaves is forecasting a 35% year-over-year growth in the spot market based on the tea leaves that they read. And so, Justin, the question is, I'm curious what Driver IQ is seeing, because on our side, these are the early indicators of year-over-year hiring. So we're in August. Our motor coach friends are really been ramping up, and that frankly started more earlier. That started last year and the year before that. But for hire truck is starting to get back in the game. This data is biased because we have aggressive customers. That's who we tend to work with. But what are you guys seeing over there at Driver IQ that's showing hiring demand being back and better, bad and back?
Yeah, I tell you what, Scott, what's always kind of interesting being in this business of screening for 25 years now is in the space of transportation. It's really the indicator of what the economy as a whole is doing. We really get to see things happening first. When the economy starts to slow down, when it starts to spark back up, we see it here in terms of driver hiring issues, where they're headed. With what I'm seeing right now, absolutely there is a fire being lit in this industry for driver demand. Our consumption of our primary products and our pre-database are at a multi-year high. So that tells me that you're spot on, that Bob in Washington, D.C. is spot on, and we're making good progress with the economy in this regard.
So that is usually the leading indicator, the spot market of how we're doing. And so what does that mean for drivers? Similar survey in FreightWaves. There's studies saying that 25% of truckload carriers raised their pay in Q2. So that happened, not a forecast, but that happened. And then that's quantitative data that we're just seeing out there in the streets, Justin, as we peruse people's websites. Advertisements on Indeed as the sign-on bonus is returning, which you and I both know yeah, it's a sugar rush. Maybe not, but it's an indicator of hiring is back again. And so I think the thing why you have the need for speed out there is to recognize that it's about to get more competitive and recognize that drivers are applying to you and multiple carriers at the same time.
Well, Scott, I think that obviously you're right on target there, and we have to always keep in mind that the available pool of drivers just continues to shrink, with veteran drivers continuing to retire out of the business, plus having years worth of soft freight, people that found a way out of the business, they're probably not coming back to it. So we've got a pool of drivers available to us, and standing up new ones is slow and arduous. So the speed of which you can obtain the resources from that pool helps you win or really lose in this market.
100%, because as you go to cost per hire, the most expensive thing you can do is train your new people. And so if you can find people that are already out there with the CDL that have the right experience and a good fit for your job, that's the best way and the most cost-effective way. Especially with those CDL closers, that is just going to get tighter and tighter because that new entrant market just won't be there. Justin, when you met me, I was a young lad in diapers recruiting truck drivers for a living. And we always broke it down to the 3 Ps back then, and it still hits today in 2026, which is your pitch, placement, and your process. Your pitch is standing out from the crowd. What's your purple cow? Placement's where you go spend your money to find them. And then a process is making it easy and smooth as a baby's bottom on your recruiting and screening. Today, we're going to focus on process because what we recommend is before you spend another dime, another dollar on marketing, get your process locked in so you're not losing people in a leaky funnel. Justin, at Reed's Trucking, you would not pour more fuel into a tank that had a hole in it. And so start there before you go throw more gasoline in there. So, Justin, let's talk about setting the stage. When you go on placement, and let's use everyone's big hairy example of Indeed, because that number is even worse than what I'm showing on the screen. You go spend a couple $1,000s on Indeed, 70% aren't worth your time. And so the challenge when I talk with recruiters is I don't need more leads. I need more qualified people. And frankly, they get worn down talking with people that don't meet their standards. And so starting with that, you got to have your filter set up so that you know who you should be prioritizing your time with, because if everybody's a priority, ain't nobody a priority. Am I right?
As Mr. Incredible said, or somebody on that show said, if everybody's super, nobody's super. I still believe that's a good mantra.
So a good way to test, Justin, is if your litmus test is, can you make an offer in a day? And we're trying to get them off the market. And if you can't make it in a day, let's start asking why that is. And so let's see if we can help the people in the audience here, because again, you and I have been doing this longer than we care to admit. So what do you see, Justin, out there is usually causing people the most time in the screening process?
The screening process is really bifurcated into two buckets. When you start looking at, maybe we'll call it three, but the issue of compliance versus company policy, something that has to be understood. A moment ago, Scott, on the slide we were talking about 70% of the applicants that you get probably aren't worth your time. One of the things I think that's really important for anybody listening here today is understand what your company policy is with regard to what you find to be acceptable. Have you actually looked at that recently? Have you evaluated your company policy against the current market and the needs that are necessary to fill your trucks? Are you running on something that's 5-10 years old? And this is the time to take a look at that so you can increase your effectiveness in the recruiting process. Within the screening realm, you really have compliance screening. These are things that are going to be required by the FMCSA. When you read federal regulations, Part 382, Part 391, it's very black and white what we're expected to be doing there. So you have that bucket. And then you have the good to know bucket, which is going to be full of other tools that you can use when evaluating that driver. Well, within both those buckets, there's some decisions that you have to make about timeliness and expense, and then all of that equaling up to usability in terms of making a decision. So where I see people losing the most time is going to be in employment verifications, drug and alcohol testing, and criminal background checks.
So from the when we did our little poll here, something that people laid out as issues slowing them down, Justin, was waiting on the candidate to complete the paperwork, the documents, and the manual data entry between systems, which is the problem that we can come solve together. But before we get into how we looked at solving these problems, we had a little fun about the hiring process and equated to getting married because that's really what we want to do. We want a long-term relationship with this driver. And so as we think about how can we reduce waiting on candidate paperwork or documents, making it easy for them, and then but still get depth. And so we're balancing here. When's the friction reduction so we can get speed? We're also thinking about price when we think about the price of these products and the length of time that it might take for them to come back. So, Justin, the coffee date is that self-reported information that you're going to get from someone. And then as we laid out here our ideal process, we have a pretty heavy lunch. And we're proposing a pretty heavy lunch menu before you have that dinner date. You might even have room for dinner after that. So, Justin, would you mind laying out, as the chef, why did you lay out the menu in this fashion?
Well, the coffee date, I think, is this is the basic stuff. You're going to get this on a short application. This is what you're going to learn about that candidate that makes you even determine that you're going to move them on to the lunch date, right? So again, what you talked about a minute ago, 70% of the folks, you don't invite them to lunch. They get stuck at the coffee date and you're like, thanks, good talking to you, and see you around. And then you move on to lunch date, which is really where we have to start to evaluate several components of, are we really going to move on to the next phase? Even though we've got kind of a heavy lunch, what we're really looking at is this is where we determine whether or not we move forward in a process that will continue the expense in bringing this relationship together, or we just say, no, that wasn't going to work for us. So looking at the lunch date, yeah, we certainly want to unpack that idea. When we look at the dinner date, it's not quite as heavy, but yet very impactful. So I certainly want to get into why we put the elements in that are there. Scott, you talk about hiring in one day or conditional offer of hire in one day, and I'm spot on with you with that. The capacity to get to a conditional offer within the first few moments or contacts that you have with the candidate determine whether you take them off the table for others that they're applying to and kind of set that opportunity up for you to be in control, or you let that candidate remain in control and you probably won't win that. So certainly the conditional offer, and I'd love to talk more about the prenup. Where do you want to start on this?
Well, and there was a good question from the audience that I think let's bring them in. So, how the heck do you get a conditional offer out on the first day within 24 hours when you have this meaty of a menu to get through and digest? And in one word, it's automation. And so, what we propose setting up is that self-reported info, and you let that candidate, that motivated candidate, run wild. If they're excited to work for you, capture those, hey, where do you live? Do you have how many years experience do you have? Do you have the right endorsements, etc.? Those basic minimum standards, and then go verify them. I'm from Cleveland, but I say I'm from Missouri. Show me. You say you have a license, let me see it. You say you have a valid medical card, let me see it. And really that's AI, that's our avatar assistant seeing it. And we're capturing those release forms so that along each stage of the process, if that license is indeed valid and current and hit the right endorsements and in a reasonable commute time, you don't need to do this if someone lives 2 hours away. Let's start with that. And then as you work your way down, you run that MVR if all those standards are met. And by you, an avatar assistant runs that. It's got to be automated if you have any shot of getting a job offer out in a day. And so really that first time you're looking at someone could be where all this is run. But let's talk about why you chose, why we put this order, specifically the pre, SIDLIS, and PSP in the order that we did.
Yeah.
I'll hit pause and then I'll finish the second question that someone asked.
Well, let's start with the MVR. Okay, so the reality of the MVR is that is the first continuation of the self-reported information. You're going to get from that short app, hey, this is where this person has their CDL endorsement. Great. Okay. The thing about running the MVR is it's going to tell you pretty quickly, do they meet your standards, which generally those standards are being set by company policy, which is typically predicated by your insurability, right? So, you don't, like I told you, evaluate where your standards come from. And that's first thing you really need to talk to is, hey, from an insurability standpoint, what are we looking at here? So you look at that MVR that's a known factor. Well, certainly from a driver IQ perspective, all the MVR data that we can get you is going to be available to you within moments. So it's fast. It can be expensive because of the variance of fees that each state across the nation has chosen to affiliate to their record data. Mostly, though, it's not too expensive. The average cost of an MVR, if you took it all nationally, is about $8. So not a huge chunk of money to really get a key component of information right there. When we move on down, go ahead.
No, the only thing I wanted to say is encourage people that Justin mentioned, $8, and yeah, it might vary if you live in Oklahoma, but as he describes these products, right, your time is valuable. Calculate your hourly wage because I hear people saying, well, I'm going to save some money and I'm going to talk to them up front. And I'm here to say that your time is valuable too. And if any of these things come back, you can't hire the person anyways. So why not set it up to run them? Sorry, Justin. It's something I get.
No, you're spot on. You're spot on. And when you run that MVR, again, you're going to get information about verifying against what that candidate's already told you and make sure that that's in the right space. And you're also going to get some MedCert information on that as well, which could be helpful. But really moving on is, how do you continue to verify what this person has told you about themselves in a very rapid and cost-effective manner? That's why I have the pre-database where it's at. The pre-database, if you're not familiar, is essentially Driver IQ's proprietary platform for we store millions upon millions of previous employment records. So as you know, under 391.23, we're required to verify previous driving history for 3 years and all the components that go along with that. The records that we have in our database are available instantly. So you might be taking a look at this person's particular stated experience profile and say, hey, I wonder how that connects with what I'm expecting. Put them through the pre-database. If there's no data in there, it doesn't cost anything. But if there is, you're going to immediately be able to see what's going on. We have about 70%, a little more than that, hit rate on any request for data. So we have a lot of information in there that's going to help you start to see right away, where did this guy work? Is he being honest about the situation? Dates of service and so forth. And just as importantly, you're going to get some specific information such as why is he eligible for rehire and or why not, with the big key thing being what I think the most important one is, did they abandon a load? So you'll get that kind of information as well. And I think most people aren't going to want to be interested in load abandonment. So right there, you're going to spend, probably not even $20 bill yet to get all of that data. And it's going to be instant for you to take a look at. So those two things right there, I think, are truly gold in this lunch date environment. When we look at these two last ones, SIDLIS and PSP. Now, SIDLIS and PSP, I like to put hand in hand together because having SIDLIS data, certainly from a driver IQ perspective, and the way that we're able to create some special value add in this, allows us to get you the most complete PSP record that would be available on that candidate. Now, there's some debate right now around PSP and its actual usability. Some perspective saying that it's kind of an expensive screen. It's not cheap, absolutely true. It is rather fast, so that's good. But also, what data are you really getting? Well, most PSP data that we're getting is actually duplicate data in terms of when you're looking at, well, you get verification of information on previous employers, or not verification, but you get pointers to previous employers. So that's good. But we already got that out of the pre-database. So, not necessary really, because you still have to verify anything you see on the PSP anyhow. So the pre-database has verified. The other thing it can do is give you accident information. Well, accident information is cool, but you're going to get that also when you verify employment. So there's some validity concerns there. But if we're going to look at that lunch date, yeah, it seems kind of heavy, but it's not. It's actually fairly cheap and very rapid.
Very rapid is the point. And something I want to encourage our people doing the screening on this call is that you chunk it up into individual orders. And the why is that if an MVR comes back and that doesn't meet your standards, stop. You'll leave the restaurant. There's no reason to order anything further. And have that mentality on each stage of the items on the menu. And no different than when you're talking to a driver and he sounds good, but you recognize he lives 3 hours away. Your job is to get off the phone because time is money and you need to move on to the next one. And so have that mentality here, and that's how you get to the dinner date quicker. And so to answer the question that, or finish answering the question that TJ asked from the audience, is we look at these coffee and lunch date as qualified, meeting your standards. But the quality component comes from this driver fit interview idea. And that is where you're starting to get about the why. And no matter if you're driving a motor coach, a school bus, if you're a flatbed driver, if you got swinging beef in the back or you're dropping fuel, you're a CDL holder, but those are wildly different worlds with wildly different jobs. And the why that person wants to have that job, that's your job as a professional. That's the human touch. Don't automate that away ever, as long as we have humans driving these things, because that's your job as the professional to figure out that best fit for your role. And so as you do that, Justin, you mind adding why we put the FMCSA clearinghouse right here in the process?
Well, absolutely. So clearinghouse is one of those things in the bucket of a compliance requirement, right? So you have to have the clearinghouse queries complete in order to put that data into the driver file. So clearinghouse is not very expensive, but it is also rather cumbersome and slow. So I like to start this process right now because what we have to do is we have to get the consent from that driver to actually query the database and get the information back. That can be time consuming. Some things that we do at Driver IQ that are certainly going to be helpful in that. When a driver actually registers with the database, they may have registered with it on day number 1 back in January of 2021, I think, is when that went live. And, the email address that they put in for their profile is no longer connected, or it's a spam and they don't look at it, all that sort of thing. So we're actually able to take the information on the driver's email that was provided to us through our process, Scott, to ensure that they're getting that request for their consent sent to the most high potential target for their compliance. That can take time. In fact, it can take days and days for that to happen. It's kind of in the driver's command at that point. Now, if they're a viable candidate, they really want to work for you, they're going to hopefully move rapidly. But we know how that goes. Even when they want to do things, we're all guilty of it. We still don't get to it, right? So having an ally that's helping you to remind that candidate and engage that candidate, pretty important. And that's why I put it at the dinner date, because it takes a while to get there and we need it for compliance. And certainly, I think the thing to consider here is, do you need it to make a conditional offer? Do you need the response to make a conditional offer? You really don't. I put it at dinner date because I want to get started on it, as it's one of the more time-consuming components.
So 100%. And at that proposal stage, your time, you can get a job offer today if your time is focused on that fit interview and you've automated everything else, and recognizing that the clearinghouse is starting the process versus finishing the process before you get that conditional offer out the door. And part of the reason we propose conditional offer here is it's a nice, in a rare instance of this world, where compliance and efficiency actually line up. And why is that there are certain jurisdictions that require a conditional offer before you run a background screening. That's where that candidate lives. And so you may not live in that state or that jurisdiction or that city, but that candidate might. And so one, that keeps you safe. But two, these are your employment verification is the most time consuming. Background check is going to be, and drug and alcohol are the most expensive and time consuming. And so you want to put those at the end anyways, so that you're judicious with your resources. So Justin, I know we're running up against the clock. And so before I move on, is there anything you want to add to what I just stated there?
Only thing I would say is when we say background check, we're really meaning criminal background checks.
Correct.
And those have a wide variance of time frames. Although in about 90% of them do complete on day one, we certainly wouldn't want to stack that up front. There's a lot to be talked about on that. Maybe we'll do that webinar another time, Scott.
So what we did together between our two organizations, there's a whole bunch of magic here, but there's two things I wanted to highlight. The first is I'm doing the screening. If I'm the recruiter or compliance person, I need to know statuses. Was it ordered? What's going on? Why is this taking so long? I don't want to talk to someone. I just want the information and I can make a decision what I do next. That's what you see on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, for my compliance people out there, you need the actual physical document. And if you're making that decision, you wouldn't need to receive the results. But you need to be able to prove that you did it to down the road, either to an attorney or to an auditor when that time comes, depending on the product, right? Background screening is going to be, if you say you're going to do it, you got to do it every time at that stage. And so you're going to be able to prove that to the attorney and the auditor, MVRs of what we're talking about for a DOT audit. Justin, if you don't mind, just with a minute here, would you mind just sharing what you see for if you know, those deep cut features that we built that we saw could make us a better experience?
I mean, manual data entry is passe. We don't need to keep doing that. The driver's given us what we need. Information can be freely moved between systems. When we built the architecture between DriverHub and DriverIQ, we created what I like to call a hybrid faceless environment, meaning the data is going to move seamlessly and fluidly. As with all data, there can be situations where that information is not accurate, not adequate. And in that case, we've built in capacity for recruiters to easily correct that problem and move between systems if necessary. I think another crucial component is release forms. Now, as a background screening company, we don't actually have to have our hands on every single release form. The release form has to be complete, it has to be available in an audit situation. In some cases, we actually do have to have the physical release in order to present that to environments that are going to provide us the data. In that case, what's great about the platform we built here is that those can be signed by the candidate in the DriverHub experience, and then that data can be pushed into the DriverIQ environment so that we have that information available. We don't have to go back to the recruiter and ask them to do an upload or things of that nature. Now, in some instances, there are certain criminal screenings where things can get a little complicated. But again, that's webinar number 2.
So in the old spirit, Justin, of you can't manage what you can't measure, if I'm looking at what's slowing you down and how do you get your hiring process down to 5 days, it starts with getting that job offer out in 1 day. And the ROI is there because your competition's hiring people in 14. And what happens that Justin just described on whether it's a release form or you're waiting on a candidate as we ask someone for a piece of information, that may only be a 5-minute task, but if there's an 24-hour delay, every day matters because if your competition doesn't need that extra day, that's how you lose that candidate. And so things that we look at, where are the kinks in the hose? And so you need to be able to have your stages laid out, looking at the time so you can say, what is preventing me from getting a job offer in a day or an offer in 5 days? You just need that visibility at your fingertips to decide to go smooth out those kinks, straighten that out, and get that flow going. And so I would say there's 3 big takeaways out there. It's really auto progress the qualified candidates so that you can start to figure out who's the right fit. And the only way you can do that is if you start your screening sooner and if you eliminate all those manual download uploads. That's the only way you get this thing cooking. If you're back in the Stone Ages, you just can't hit that job offer in a day, and it's just impossible. But it is possible today. And so if anything we shared today was interesting for you to see, or you want to hear why Justin and I paired what we paired on that menu and kind of tailor that to you and your stage, because that is our starting template. And we recognize that everyone's got a little bit of nuance. And so you might live in the great state of Oklahoma. Maybe you don't want to do MVRs that early. Okay, maybe we move the pre up in that situation. So there are different examples like that we're happy to help with here. So if that's helpful, sign us off. We're both here to serve. Justin, any parting shots?
Hey, I'm here to solve problems, and so is the whole DriverIQ team. So if you've got problems, well, we'll help you solve them.
Okay.
Scott, always a pleasure. Thank you, son.
Thank you, Justin. Let's get those job offers out in 1 day, people.
I call him son because I've known him that long.
I was in diapers. Thanks again, Justin.
Hey, man.